have added some photos of the process of cutting and drying, but we haven't. So if we just come around that way, I don't think there's too many holes there. There weren't this morning at about 5 o'clock, so perhaps there shouldn't be more. Which is a Moorpark selection from way back. It was found and developed at Renmark, and is an earliest variety, ripens end of the first week, into the second, sometimes into the third week of December. Depending on seasonal conditions, it'll vary that sort of time frame. So Stories is quite a reliable variety, not a really good drying variety because they aren't a real solid flesh, and this year they were even worse than that. They dried quite light. But, the crude term is they were gutless, and if that offends any of you, I'm sorry, but there's not a lot of body in them. The sugar, they can taste sweet, but you need body in them to get some weight out of them. So didn't have it this year. We packed our fruit for sale into a 10 kilogram box. Usually you can get 10 kilograms in them with a bit of space to spare. We had to work hard to get 10 into it this year. So that's Story apricots, which are the first ones. The next variety that we've got a mystery, and I'm not sure about the mystery part of it, but again it's a Moorpark selection. Moorpark is the really old traditional apricot. Mystery is a selection of those. The traditional Moorpark apricot could be green on the shoulders and the top where it joined onto the tree, and dripping ripe on the bottom. A bit hard to keep up with. You'd send the pickers up the patch in the morning and they could neatly pick it. I happen to be colourblind, I think I've told you that before, so me and apricot picking are real mates, I tell you. I feel every one. But you also work out a few things. You say where the birds are eating, that's where there's a fair chance of ripe ones. And if you've missed a few, they're on the ground. So when kids start, young people start, they usually start cutting apricots and then progress to being in the picking team. So usually my part of the education program at that stage is, just come with me, young fella. If there's none on the ground, there's none ripe up there. Quick. And if there's some on the ground, yes, there's some ripe ones, but they won't be at that level. They won't be at that level. They'll be up there because apricots ripen down the tree, most times. Occasionally they'll upset you and do it a bit different. Sometimes leaders a bit, but that's getting technical. The majority of times they'll ripen from up there. If the birds have started on them, that's where the ripe ones are. Don't bother about looking at the rest of them. Look for a bit of tree damage, bird damage. Get picking them. Have the bucket so you can pick both ends. If you're on a ladder and fall off, keep picking on the way down. Make right. I've mostly fallen. Oh, it's yours. So that's the varieties of apricots. You might have heard we've planted some Riverbright apricot trees, which we're going to be U-Butte. They're magic taste, ripper drying, they're fleshy apricot, good size, everything going for them. But if you've got 240 trees and they're quite big trees, we'll get nearly out that far to see them in a while. They're up here in the past. You get 200 kilograms off 240 trees, not a lot of apricots per tree. Fairly expensive picking them too, cost of the bucket. Oh, there's 6 on that tree. Another half a dozen over here. I can tell you can pay the bill, I give up on them. They get in the chainsaw, pruning them this side. We'll fix that, we'll work towards it. So that's, and then there's all trial trees out there. Most of them numbers, because they breed them and give them a number, and then you look at them and you say, oh, this one's a decent number, and you plant some more of those perhaps. I said before, I hope that's the next bloke and not me, but we'll work on that. So the fruit comes in, we pick them in the dip tins. Now the non-Germans in the community have some fairly crude terms about dip tins. They tell us we can use these as helmets, because they've got corners and they're a bit square. We tolerate it most of the time, but we kind of have a answer to that. So we pick them into there, you get about 8 or 9 kilograms of fruit if it's full. The riper the fruit, the less you put in it, because the more ripe fruit you put in, the more it smashes up, the less good it is when it gets down here. And we aim to pick every 3 or 4 days, depending on how quick it's ripening, etc. Try and keep up with the ripe fruit. If it ripens too quick and it ends up on the ground, it's gone, past. Can't do anything with it. Once it's hit the ground, walk away, next. So it comes into the shed, and yes, it doesn't look like it at the moment, but in the last few years we've cut where these bins are, that's where the tree's cut. Neighbours' children come this year. I think the girl was about 9 and the lad was about 12. They cut one each end of the tray. Doesn't take them quite as long, and they get there and, come on Alan, you've got to be cutting your half because I've cut my half, so there's a bit of that. And then they go home and start working out at $2.75 or $2.85 a tray. Well, I'm making a couple of bob today. Mum comes down and said, what'd you pay them? Oh no, she didn't say why'd you pay them that much. But that's about how it works for the young ones. They progress from there to cutting on their own. And Tony happens to be a bit of a hard taskmaster when they're cutting apricots. You cut them properly, you put them on the tray properly, because if you don't do that properly, the product at the other end ain't too fancy. If you want to mash the apricots up, see you later, not interested. If you can't cut them properly, don't come tomorrow. Most kids pick it up real quick. You've got to cut them in half. There's a little line on an apricot, suture line. You cut it round the suture line, you split it in half, spit the stone out, usually in a bucket, and sit the apricots, and I like them bottom end into the tray, growing end, tip end out, so you can sit them. The flatter you can sit them, the better, because when you put them into sulphur, they juice. If they're a bit higgledy-piggledy, yeah, come on, where's the rocket scientist? The juice is on the tray, it's on the ground, it's out of the fruit. You've lost sugar, you've lost weight, you've lost everything. And they're hard to get off the tray. And this bloke does most of that. He don't like that. Overripe ones make slabs. Now the locals and the others that know a bit about dried apricots, slabs are the ones. They're the ones that have lost their shape because they're overripe. They're also the ones with the highest sugar. And yes, they're pretty nice. You eat too many of them, you know about it too, but perhaps we won't talk about that too loud. So that's cutting and drying apricots. They're cut on the tray, and I haven't stopped and counted it. I have, but I can't remember how many apricot halves, and it depends on how big the fruit is. How many halves you get across there, and then how many rows you get across there. You know, it fills in the day if you work it all out as you go. So you fill a tray with apricots. We we squirt them with a bit of water when they finish cutting them. Just to keep them a bit fresh. And then when we're putting them into the sulphur tent, we'll use sulphur tents. Hopefully next year we've got sulphur houses, and if you're into dried apricots, you know what I'm talking about. But you cover them to sulphur them. You burn elemental sulphur to release sulphur dioxide, which is the preservative in them. Before we put them into the sulphur, we actually hose them down again, make them quite wet. And sometimes, you know, you'd have to be starting to think, oh, he's drying fruit and he's making them wet to start with. Well, it's necessary. Well, I think it improves the whole process, because if the fruit ain't wet, the sulphur dioxide won't dissolve into the fruit, and that's what's preserving it. Part of the preservation is the fact that it kills the yeast in the fruit to start with, and the other part is that the sulphur keeps the bugs and wogs out afterwards. So that's the dual purposes of sulphuring. Yes, you can dry apricots without sulphur. You take your chances. They've got to dry very quickly, otherwise they're black and not very attractive. Some people seem to like them that way, and we get numerous requests, or not numerous, we get requests on occasions, you have non-sulphur dried apricots. No, we don't. I like to have them with a bit of colour. The amount of sulphur in them determines how well they'll keep for the year. If you don't get enough sulphur into them, obviously they can't keep it. The quicker you get them to seal, the skin, get a bit of a skin on the fruit, the more sulphur you'll hold in. We haven't had them tested, but every now and then the industry has a bit of a squawk. There's too much sulphur in them, and one of the international crews on food safety and that get a bit carried away of how much sulphur's in fruit. Whether there's 1,000 parts per million or 3,000 parts per million, there's still sulphur in it. If you're allergic, going to react to sulphur, you will. Sulphur has its downsides as well, I acknowledge that. But if you haven't got enough in, they won't preserve. You see dried apricots that have started to go dark, it's because they've lost sulphur and the yeast started to kick in, the sugar's breaking down, and they're going dark. They're going rotten. They're breaking down. You can reverse it. Magic trick, add some bicarbonate of soda and brighten them up for cooking. Didn't tell you that.
So Tony, you don't dip, do you used to dip them? Because that's a lot of people do in their home dry stuff, they dip.
Yeah, that's using either potassium or sodium metabisulfite.
Yeah.
And it's a sulfite that ends up the preservative.
Yeah.
So you're using sodium or potassium metabisulfite. You've got to soak them to get that into the fruit. So instead of that's a liquid, we burn sulphur to make sulphur dioxide to make the sulphite in the fruit.
Can't buy
Same
sodium metabisulfite anymore. We couldn't buy it.
Go talk to a winery, they add it to their product fairly often. Sodium or potassium, same fruit.
You can get it at the hardware store.
Yeah, variously you can. It's the metabisulfite part, the sodium and the potassium is a marginal difference. If you're into your chemistry, yeah. Some will tell you potassium gives you a bit better taste or whatever anyway. Sandy does that when she makes slab from time to time. You know, slab as in spread out, mashed up fruit, adds metabisulfite, tastes good. We do a bit of that, tray size sometimes. So that's cutting and drying apricots. Peaches we do the same thing. You get about a tray and a half of cut fruit out of a dip tin of apricots. You get about a tray out of peaches, depending on how full the bucket to start with. Peaches you do the same thing, but you put the the top end into the wood. Because when you put the next tray on and you use thicker pleat trays because your peaches are often bigger, you put the top end into the timber so that when you put the next tray on it doesn't squeeze the bottom of our peach. That's how we do it. Away we go. We have cut and dried pears a couple of times, but not much money in them sometimes. A lot of work.
Just going to say, you're talking about slab dried stuff. Some people would have seen some in those bowls on the tables at lunchtime, and that's done with sodium metabisulfite. And
yeah, you mix it in. That's put it in the mix master or the food processor, whatever. Mash it up. Add sodium or potassium metabisulfite as a preservative. That's drying that.
Tony, some of our visitors might not know about, and you put the trays out in the sunshine
Oh,
and all that.
yeah, righto. Better have the whole story. Cutting them is only half the deal. Said we have in the past used sulphur tents, which is effectively just a big plastic bag. Metal tunnel into it, put a pot of sulphur in the end, light it up, burn. Hope it burns for 6 to 8 hours, because it's not only the amount of sulphur, it's really the length of time it's exposed to the sulphur, because the sulphur's got to get into the fruit. So in the past we've done that on a cement slab just out there. These wire setups up here is where we bring, and there's a trolley just around the corner there a bit. We're pretty well laid out here at the moment, partway through a construction site. There was some in the system thought we might have been doing this when we were cutting apricots back in November, December. No, we'll do it later. Anyway, it's still happening. So trays are stacked 25 high, or up to 25 high on a pallet, on the cart, into the sulphur, out of the sulphur, out here. Then we spread them out on those wires. Now, the wires keep the trays up off the ground. A, it keeps them a bit cleaner. B, it saves your back work bending over as far. There's still growers around that spread the trays on the ground. So we spread the trays out there. Apricots you leave spread out until they're dry, or you can, if you've got enough trays and enough space. Depending on how hot and or breezy the weather is, or a combination of the both, how long they'll take to dry. In really hot weather with a bit of breeze, 4 or 5 days, and you can have them dry enough basically to rub off, give or take, maybe. Usually about a week to 10 days. But yeah, up off the ground with a bit of breeze around them, usually about a week, and you can be rubbing them off. Rubbing them off means you're scraping them off of these trays into a container, and as in our case, as we do that, we grade them into top stuff, slab stuff, and slab is technically when they've lost the full circle of the fruit. That's how that can be judged. Into that, if there's a bit of discolour or mashed up fruit, we pull that out as well. So hopefully you get a pretty good line of fruit at the end of the day. So yeah, out here, rub the trays off. And sometimes if they dry quick enough, you can reuse a tray 3 times for apricot season. Sometimes 4 perhaps, but 3 would be a good run. So it takes you about a fortnight of turnaround for a tray. You saw a bit in the presentation about the sultanas and the currants on the drying racks. There's a drying rack there behind us. Nearly a thing of the past. A lot of the dried vine fruit industry is now trellis dried, where they trellis them a bit differently than what we do. Go along and cut the canes so that the cane with the fruit hanging on it basically dies. Well, it dies, so it dries. And then they come through with a modified grape harvester to get the berries off of that. Most times they have to put them through a dehydrator to finish them off, and away you go, you've got dried sultanas. The downside of that in our situation was multiple. One was the fact that we're a small acreage, the machinery would be expensive, and hard to justify. There was not a lot of other people around the place interested in going into trellis drying at that stage, so we chose not to, and I think in the long run it's mostly been to our advantage. Because to trellis dry, you've got to work from when you reckon you'll get the product dry out this end in late March or early April or whenever, and then you work back and say, well, I've got to cut, because you're cutting the cane, so you're cutting the fruit and off the vine, so you've got to say, well, I've got to cut that the second week of February. Doesn't matter how ripe it is, how much sugar's in the fruit, whatever. It's got to be cut the 2nd of February, otherwise you'll run out of time to get it dry. Reflects in the maturity, well, our opinion is it reflects in the taste of the fruit, etc., etc., how much sugar's in it. So we've stayed the old-fashioned way, and you can tell me I'm old-fashioned plenty of times and it won't make much difference, we'll still keep doing it. We leave them until A, they taste and the sugar levels are in them, then we pick them, put them on the rack and take your chances how long it takes you to dry them. On the rack, in good weather, and we spray the mixture of vegetable oil or a vegetable oil combination and potassium bicarbonate onto them. The oil makes the mixture flow around the berry, and the carbonate, the skin of a sultana is like a tiled roof with wax platelets. So the carbonate in fact holds the wax platelets apart, open, so that the moisture can come out of the skin. Currants are different, you don't need to do it on currant. Currant skin is a smooth skin, no wax, limited if any wax on it, so you don't have to spray them, you just put them on the rack and hope they dry. And the fruit, we put sheets underneath the racks, the fruit comes down onto those sheets, we pull the sheets out, rake them out, what we call rake them out, even them out over the sheets, so they're about 20 millimetres to 25 millimetres thick, because it's on black plastic, and that helps finish off the drying. If you have them thicker, it takes longer. If you have them thinner, well, it's okay, it dries them quicker. But that's the way we do it. The machine, when they trellis dry, often they can only get them down to 18% moisture on the vine, and it needs to be 13% to deliver, 14 to deliver to the system. The difference, you put them through a dehydrator, which means gas, it means labour, it means machine. We've had to do it a couple of years with a dehydrator to finish them off. And part of our new system will include a dehydration ability to dehydrate them. So that's how we do it. We can leave them on the vine quite a bit later. I've told my neighbours plenty of times, plenty of years, that Tony, you should have started picking the sultanas 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago or whatever. And I'd say, hey, they weren't tasting real fancy. Their taste is not going to improve once you pick them. If they haven't got sugar in them when you pick them, ain't going to magically get there, same as the maturity. So we aim to leave them as late as we can to dry them. So that's how that works. Ron can tell you more about that because he dries currants as well. Yeah. So that's a bit about that production. If you want to go for a walk, we can go out across this way. Someone asked me about pruning the sultanas, the tall prune ones. This patch in front of the house is a bit over 3 acres, hectare and a half, give or take. There's 3 varieties of vines in there. The bottom one's a sun muscat, which is a sultana type muscat. If you're into dried gordo or raisins, the old raisins, they have a bit of a raisin taste about them. That's why we've planted those. They are a seedless grape, whereas raisins come from a seeded grape. They haven't been the best patch of grapes we've planted to take off and get them going, but hopefully eventually they do. 15 rows of those, 14 rows of a black gem, which is a new release from Ciro in the dried fruit industry, which is a currant, black grape, seedless, powdery and downy mildew resistant, so we don't have to use chemicals on them, sulphur and copper, etc., for controlling the mildews. And they're, I think, a very nice tasting grape. They've got a bit of a spicy about them, a bit of a gordo-y taste, raisin taste about them. So we think they're a bit special. I think 3 growers in South Australia got them at this stage, and I think we would be the only growers that dry and pack and sell them as a line of dried fruit. And the top ones up there, this patch was all green as before. Sometimes when you aim for it to happen, that is successful, but yeah, you get the drift. If you want them to, Murphy's Law. when you want it that way, it doesn't. If you didn't, it doesn't. Anyway, no sultana. You right with that? Usually they'll skip a couple of 3 buds and then start having fruit, and they'll have fruit for 4 or 5 from the next buds. Then they'll miss a few, and about 10 or 12 out from the buds, the knobs on the cane. About 10 or 12 out, they'll start having fruit again, and that's sultanas. This next patch here is another disappointing patch. We had all sorts of problems with them. The rootlings come in from Victoria. They had to be heat treated for disease control, and we'd upset the biochemistry a bit. I hope she keeps moving because she'll get ants up her pants and that'll be fun. So that's not one of our success stories, I can tell you. Just going along here a bit further, and we're into the Xanthi currants, which are the old original currants. Much further, someone asked about Turkish apricots.
Well, you got some growing here, have you?
No, the system's trying to grow them with a higher sugar. Technically, the Turkish apricot should be called a plumcot because it's not a true apricot. That's point 1. Point 2 is that it's a very high sugared fruit. Being a very high sugared fruit, they can leave a bit more moisture in it, and like a lot of things, you start making sugary things, moisture and sugar seem to go together. So it's often softish. Most Australian and the old traditional varieties run at about 18% sugar maximum, 16-18%, sometimes into the low 20s. Turkish apricots will often run at 30% units of sugar. So and sugar's a preservative. So sometimes they'll start promoting Turkish dried apricots as a low sulphur fruit, which they can be, because they need less sulphur and they've got sugar to preserve it. So when I've eaten about 3 in my life, I think. No, I tell a lie, must be half a dozen by mistake. And sometimes some of them are in buns, but it's really a different product. And their production technique. We've tried here at Time of Tea, squirting the seeds out of, the stones, pips out of the fruit to make a whole fruit product. A good way to use a small apricot that otherwise would dry up to nothing. It's a lot of work. Yes, you end up with a product, but you've got to get it, balance it just right. If you've sulphured it with the stone in, you've got to pick the right time to squirt the stone out, and it can be difficult. So there's a technical difference in the product that you've started with. I suggest over on the sultanas we need to leave a longer cane because that grows fruit. These are currants, and you spur prune them, two bud, and the bud's the little lump on the cane, about 2 buds, and sometimes you have to thin the buds out, otherwise you'll strain the vine and it won't go any well. So we had a major change of what we were growing in about 2005, 2006. In fact, it was 2006, I think. This patch has been sultanas. We top worked the sultanas to Carina currants because currants were going to be the thing to grow. At $1,850 a tonne, there was even a bob in it, or $1, $1. There's going to be $1 in growing these currants, you see, and righto, we'll grow currants. We'll even get to perhaps growing them trellis dried, but we'll see how that was going to proceed. In about 3rd week of January, I think it was, 2006, we got a phone call from the pack house grower representative. Sandy answered the phone, and it was delayed the end result marginally. And the news was the price of dried currants this year is $650 a dry tonne. Oh, so Sandy took as I said, she had taken the phone call, and she said to this guy, I think I can tell you what Tony's reaction's going to be. Because surprised, we'd been married a while by that stage, and she'd worked out a few things anyway. She was dead right. Because he told me the same story. I said, yep, tell you the answer right now, fella. Yeah, what's that? I said, they're staying exactly where they are. I will not be picking them. Oh yeah, but if you picked them, you'd get something for what you've put into them. I said, hey, listen to this bit of information for yourself. If I got to go out there and pick them, and I'm going to lose money, I think I'd be better off sitting watching the cricket. Oh, but you get something for them. I said, hey, get the message. they're staying there. I'm not working for nothing. Well, can't be paying somebody else to do it because eventually you got the hint that I wasn't going to dry them. And that was the year, in fact, that we decided that we'd actually pick and dry them and market our own. So that's when we started. We made inquiries to a couple of bakeries that we'd been supplying dried apricots to. They gave us an indication of what the wholesale market price would be, give or take. One of the other guys that he's actually in Renmark found a pack house or a processor that would process from stalk product to pack product, and so we took off and I said to Sandy, well, we took about a week or 10 days, about nearly 10 days to make that decision. And I said in the end to Sandy, I said, we'll either end up with, and it ended up about 5 tonne of currants, I think, and about 8 tonne of sultanas. I said, we'll either have 13 tonne of cheap feed, stock feed for somebody and hope we get a bit from that, or they'll sell and life will go on. Well, the market, we found markets for the majority of that, and we're still marketing our own now. That crop.
That it won. I was going to ask you.
Yeah, it's not okay.